You're about to hear a brief conversation with an incredible artist. Part autobiographical journey, part literary analysis, and part late-night chat in the theatre bar. This is Hear Me Out.
And I'm your host, Lucy Eaton. Please welcome to the stage, David Mumeni. It is approaching Christmas. Dave, you're on my Christmas episode.
I am honoured. I feel like the fairy on top of the tree, or the star on top of the tree.
Well, exactly. That's always how I've thought of you, as the fairy on top of the tree. Dave, so much to chat about. First of all, I would like to say I have wanted you to come on this show since day one, episode 1, when I scribbled down a list of potential guests. I was like, I want to get Mumeni on because I hugely respect and love you just as a person, but I am so in awe of what you're doing in the industry with Open Door.
Very much.
And for people listening who don't know what Open Door is, don't you worry, we're going to talk about it. But I just think it's so amazing, and I've been totally enthralled by it, and I just think you're doing such a good thing, and it's clearly so needed because the results you're getting are incredible for the actors that you're working with. So before we even launch into the speech, can you explain a little bit about what Open Door is so people who don't know it know why I just think you're one of the best people?
That's my Christmas present. Open Door supports young people from low-income backgrounds who don't have the financial support or resources to apply for the UK's leading drama schools. So we pay for their travel, they get free auditions to the schools, they get one-on-one tutoring on their speeches, up to 15 hours over the whole sort of process. There's sort of skill-based and creative workshops that take place bi-weekly, and that could be like movement and voice, or acting, obviously, or people coming in, talking to them. They get a buddy each, someone who's perhaps from a similar background to them, who's gone through the drama school process, who's an actor that they get to speak to and just have an extra ear. They go to the theatre for free, so they go to the National, Donmar, all these places for free. And where they do all their work is in those buildings, so they sort of...
they feel a sense of belonging.
Yeah, less intimidating, and that those buildings are for them. And so that's a big part of it as well, really.
I think that it's so remarkable because to absolutely hold my hand up, I can speak to this from the position of definitely being someone who has had a very privileged life, and I had a very privileged entry into this industry in that I was at a university where lots of people went to drama school afterwards, so I had lots of people to talk to, and I definitely felt, I guess this is one of the big things we're trying to combat in the industry at the moment, I felt there was a place for me in it. And that's the problem, I think, is these people who don't feel there's a place for them when actually there is, and there must be. But I remember being at university and applying for drama schools, and I applied for LAMDA, RADA and Guildhall first, and I got rejected from all of them without a recall. And I remember being quite like, oh, quelle surprise. I didn't expect that to happen. And at the time, there was a professional director called Charlie Westenra who was doing a show at our university because I was in that insanely privileged position. And I remember she sat me down and was like, you haven't got into any of those drama schools because you're picking the wrong speeches. And she handpicked 2 speeches for me, directed me in them, and then I ended up reapplying to LAMDA in the same year and getting offered a place. So I think from the privileged position, I can see how essential it is that if some people in the world are getting that opportunity, everyone needs to be getting that opportunity.
Yeah, and access to someone like that director that you spoke to, that you could spend 10 minutes with someone and completely change what they end up doing for their auditions and those speeches. And, it's getting worse in education in terms of access to sort of drama and the arts. And so, in some schools you've got the PE teacher who's doing it in rotation with humanities and PE and drama. And so sometimes someone's first sort of... or if anyone decides that after 18 that they want to, after school, that they want to become actors or work behind the scenes, where do you go? I mean, London there's a lot more, but where do you go? So, yes, the finances of it, but also that other stuff, that I guess cultural capital, the sort of just knowledge.
Yeah.
Because it's all just so, it's sort of demystifying it, and that it's all this sort of, if I do this or this or this, I'll get in. And you just think, oh, I've heard of at school we did Harold Pinter, so I'll do a Harold Pinter speech, and I'll play that 40-year-old man that I did in the thing. You just don't know that, like, oh, I should play something that sounds like me, that I connect to, and that could come out of my mouth, So
yeah, absolutely.
100%. I was going to say, when you said about, being in a more privileged position and feeling like, oh yeah, why couldn't I get in? And that was it, really. Like, I used to sit on the auditions for National Youth Theatre, and the sort of, generally the sort of privately educated people would come in, and there was just a beautiful confidence to them, which wasn't cocky or arrogant or nothing like that, just of like, oh yeah, I want to be an actor, and so here I am, which was so different to the mindset that those that, generally didn't have that, or from a lower socio-economic background would come in and going, really shy, imposter syndrome. And so it's just balancing that out, really, so there's an equity between them and their peers when they're auditioning, and so hopefully it becomes just about talent rather than anything else.
And I think also what's so clever about what you're doing is that you are making huge changes to the way our industry works from the starting point. And I think there's a shortcut that's trying to be made at the moment in the industry where, we're just making an effort to make casts more diverse in terms of race, class, gender, but in a way that's not the most pressing place to make the change, because just sort of shoehorning numbers or ratios into casts, which I know happens in our industry, there will be almost a contractual thing that's like, this cast has to have 50% this, 50% that, that is sort of not solving the problem. It's like the problem's got to be solved right at the beginning, which is why Open Door is so amazing, because what you're doing is you're getting it to a place where we won't need to state in advance that a cast needs to be more representative of the whole population, because the pool of actors you're looking at will be more representative of the whole population.
Exactly, the pool. We still want to make that pool big for them to choose from.
When did you start Open Door? How long has it been?
2017, I think I started putting it together. So the first group return, the 18 to 19, was the sort of that, if that makes sense, that school year, 18 to 19.
Yeah, so you did a sort of showcase, didn't you, that was almost like a celebration of that first class.
The showing, yeah.
Which was like effectively getting all of them to do the speeches they did for their auditions, but just they could do it in front of some industry guests, in front of friends and family. And I remember being invited to that, and it was at the Soho Theatre, not Soho Theatre, it was at Pleasance in Islington. And I remember, and I must have told you this before, Dave, but I had a programme. And because of my producing work as well, I was like, oh, great, got a programme with everyone's names. Like, I'm obviously going to make a note of anyone I think is really good in case, we want to use them in a show in the future.
Yeah.
And the first person came on and did their speech, and it was just out of this world good. I was like, oh my God, that person was amazing. Put a little star next to their name. And then the second person came on, and I was like, Jesus, that was incredible. Oh my God, a little star next to their name. And 4 or 5 people in, I was like, oh, I get it. I get
everyone,
it.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show how much, if you can just give people the same help at the beginning, what the talent is that's out there.
I think everyone expected that showing to probably be a bit like, because the narrative was like, oh, we can't find these actors, and the talent isn't out there.
Oh yeah, can you just clarify that for the listener? So what is that attitude?
Well, I think the narrative for a long time was like, we'd love to have a more diverse group of people come through the school, or like you said, in the industry, like our plays, but like they just can't find them, like they're just not there. Yeah. So even when I started Open Door, and I'm from Iranian heritage, Middle Eastern heritage, and I was like, well, obviously I do want people from Black, Asian, global majority backgrounds, like obviously, but I'm not putting people in just because, it's about talent and it's about class, And so even my brain changed, where I was like, oh, well, apparently, these people don't exist, even as one. And then 60% of the people that came through the door were Black, Asian, or global majority. And that wasn't because we particularly seeked out or put anything different. It was just because it was suddenly free and accessible. And they felt that it was for them. So it kind of you just realize it's all nonsense, really. But yeah, I never set out to. It wasn't about diversity or representation. That really wasn't what it was about. I heard everyone with the industry was talking about it, and we need all this, and I was like, well, like you just said before, like it's grassroots really. It needs to start the start really. And I'd worked in schools and youth theatres and kept seeing young people I thought were talented, but I was like, they just didn't know these routes existed or was for them, or didn't know how to get in it. So I was like, everyone was talking about how expensive dramas to get into drama school was at the time, and it's different now, but at the time.
Can you clarify that for the listener? So
yeah,
what's
well, it's changed. I mean, like, you know, before auditions were like £50, £60. Some schools it went up to I think at one point one of them went up to 80 or something. So, and that's completely changed now. And I think, you know, that's the influence of open door, new leadership coming in, just the times changing. And so now a lot of schools it's around 35, which is still an expense for a lot of people who apply for multiple schools. But then for people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds or lower income backgrounds even, there are auditions for free if you're a household income of 25k or below. And then you can also, there are like travel bursaries and things like that for people who want to travel. There's still work needs to be done, but it's massively changed. And other parts of it have changed. You know, it was the first time a lot of the schools had that sort of unbiased feedback about their audition processes, because, you know, go every year and you get in, and we had, you know, anonymously, we asked everyone for what their experience was at each school, and we sort of gave it back. And I think that was a bit of a shock to the school, because no one had ever said it. Because, you know, if you ask for feedback from the people applying, they're not really going to give you a bad review because they want to get in next year, you know.
Yeah.
So, but and most of them were just really positive about it and took it on. And so those processes are different in terms of our attitude toward the room, in terms of understanding that, you know, perhaps an experience for those people coming in, if it's a nice experience in the room, they're probably going to do better work. You know, if we feel confident, we'll do better work. So even that,
I always think that any type of audition that intimidates people, I'm like, what are you trying to achieve by
of course,
making the person walking in the room feel spooked?
Yeah, you don't do your best work. Also, like Shakespeare being a sort of definitely needed in the first round, that generally has changed, because, you know, like I said, you've got places where there isn't even a drama department, and Shakespeare or Jacobean can do like amazing stuff. You know, it's usually like a really simple sort of objective in the speech, and it's a big emotion. You know, it's either I'm going to kill you or love you, or it's really simple.
Yeah.
But to get to that level where you're able to use that language in that way is a lot of work, as we found. Hence we did 15 hours with them one-on-one.
Yeah.
So just knowing that is a barrier in itself, and that's something you can go learn later on.
Absolutely. And also, I guess the industry has changed so much since the first time these auditions were being created, right? Where so little of the work out there is classical now.
Yeah, and I think we should learn it. I think you should be able to do it. You know, one of the reasons I set up as well, I worked on sets and I'd see people be what they are, and then at 25, when they stop being a young Manchester lad, and it's they stop being a young Manchester lad, so they have to be able to do other things. And so it should be that they can go do a Netflix series and then do a play at the Globe and then do a national, you know what I mean? So, but just knowing that it can be taught, and it doesn't have to be an innate thing, and of course it's going to come easier to people who are obviously not from the same world as Shakespeare, but in terms of, you know, what's expected in terms of, understanding of language. And for me, drama school was my biggest education in terms of English and language, you know, like I more than I ever had at school. And so for me, it was a massive education. So it's allowing that place to be it rather than to be expected before.
So with all that said about Open Door, what is the speech that you picked? Because it is related, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It was a speech that in that first showing that you saw at Open Door, one of the young people did. It's Lucy Kirkwood's NSFW, and we sort of ended the showing on it. Do
you remember who was the person who did it?
Brandon Grace, who's one of the loveliest actors going, who's doing really well. Just did a Shakespeare at the National. Just did I think it was Much Ado.
Oh, amazing!
And he did this speech at the end, and it's sort of perfectly fitting for him, I think.
So yeah, tell us about the speech. What happens in the speech? Who's the character?
Well, one of the guys at the interview's been seeing someone, and he's at his interview, and he realises actually that he sort of loves this woman he's been seeing.
Sorry, just to clarify, so there's interviews going on in the play?
Yeah, and he realised he really loves this woman, and one thing he admires about her is that the way she sort of stands up for herself and other people. And he talks about how they're on the tube and someone was inappropriate and got their penis out, and instead of sort of cowering away, which would obviously be absolutely fine, or not saying anything, she decided to sort of shout chipolata at it and got the whole carriage doing that, and sort of, I guess, taking the power away from that man. And he sort of talks about how he admires her, and I guess has a sort of feel that they wish he did that a bit.
Did Brandon find this?
Yeah.
Did someone at Open Door find it?
No, he found it for himself and did it for his auditions and wanted to do it in the showing.
Yeah.
He just did it really well, I think. But when you said, I need a speech and I had limited time, I just thought, oh, maybe that one, because I always think of that one.
That was another thing I just wanted to talk about briefly, because I know this was the first one that sprung to mind for you. And you were then trying to think of other things and you were like, there just isn't really anything. And I think that's interesting in itself because, for instance, at that drama school level, we think about speeches all the time. At the beginning of your career, all you're thinking about is monologues and speeches. And it's another thing, I guess, that's slightly outdated in terms of course, there's got to be a way of assessing people, of picking who, gets into a drama school. But speeches often become so little a part of our lives and careers.
Yeah, later on.
Have you ever had to do a monologue for one of your jobs?
I think when I had to do I did a play with Cheap by Jow and I had to do a classic monologue and I just did the one I got in for drama school. It was it's called Cymbeline. It's from Cymbeline. That's it. There was this play at the National that I wanted to go up for. I thought it was going to had like a massive director, great, amazing, like very well-known writer. It was going to be on I think it was on the Olivier, and it had a Rihanna tune in it. It was about protest, and there was this character of Iranian heritage. I was like, God, this is going to be amazing.
This is my dream job. I'm going to get it.
Did a recall and then didn't get it, and I was really disappointed because you haven't done a play before. And then literally a week later, then I had to audition for Cheap by Jow. And I had to just go in and do a monologue. And then I met my mate, literally it was near Holloway Road. Met my mate on Holloway Road. And then got a call that I had the job then. And knew I was going on this amazing tour. I'd never had a yes so quickly. I mean, literally it was 45 minutes later. And then I went to New York and Sydney and in Paris and the Barbican and Madrid. And I met one of my best mates and who's now my best mate. And so yeah, that time I did do it and did work out. But apart from that, you're right. You never do it.
But again, it's like my comment right at the start about drama school auditions, and I got rejected with no recall, and then I got accepted, not on waiting list or anything, within the same year because of a difference in speech, because of probably a difference of person in the room. And you have that experience where you get rejected from a job because apparently you've just not done a play before, and then within 2 weeks you're accepted within 2 minutes. It's like, it sort of sums up the mania of this industry.
Yeah, and it was I thought that was going to be the biggest play, and that ended up being a 1-star reviewed play, which you don't even get anymore. I feel like you just don't get 1-star reviewed plays anymore. And then with the one with Cheap by Jow, it was the best play they'd done in ages, and I got to go around the world, and so it was a nice sort of it always reminds you if you get a no or it doesn't work out, something probably is coming.
Yeah, and it is rare that the things you think are going to be huge are the things that are huge.
Yes, yeah, 100%. I mean, it's a BBC job that I was final, whoever rounds or whatever. It was detective, and it was supposed to be modern, and it's this guy from Iranian heritage, this guy from anyway. And I thought, God, whoever gets that, their career's gonna go. And it just doesn't work out like that. And whereas I was in the second series of Stath.
Oh yeah.
Let's Flats, and that's done more for me than pretty much I think anything I've ever been in. And I just feel sort of lucky that I was a part of that.
Yeah.
It's probably done more for me than something I've been a regular in, you just don't know what it is. There's no formula.
Because you don't know what's going to be a hit, basically.
Yeah, and you get a lot of young actors, in terms of through Open Door, I meet more and more, and it was it's a Netflix show, and you're there's so many Netflix shows now. You know what's going to be a hit, what's not. There's no formula to it, and you just got, I guess, just keep doing a good job and
take the work you're given to a certain extent, as long as you believe in it.
One of them might do well.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned a couple of times in our chat that you were going for a job and you were excited to get it because it was someone of Iranian heritage. To what extent do you find a lot of the stuff you go up for that is marked in the character description? That's a character trait. They want him to be from the Middle East.
Yeah. It's changed. I mean, it's sort of interesting, and a lot of people from, my heritage or mixed heritage of mine sort of feel this sometimes, that sort of overlooked sometimes in terms of the talk about diversity and representation. And I'd say for people from Middle Eastern and North African heritage, not that much has changed, really. The only time generally you'll see people is when they're refugee or they're victims or perpetrators of sort of stuff. And so there hasn't really been a shift, as much as I think there has been, but not as much as I think everyone would like. Early on, it was very clear that when the industry was a sort of different way, you were sort of pigeonholed like that, and so you'd only go up for certain parts, and they tend to be victims or perpetrators or stuff, or the
Yeah.
funny Leeson guy. And then when the shift happened, which is about sort of 5-6 years ago, and a bit before then, it started to change. Then it would be sort of nondescript. But for me, I guess I'm quite fortunate that I sort of have a career that's such a range of stuff that it isn't. So I will get a mix. I wouldn't say it's a majority that. I think I get excited when it is sometimes because I don't often get to play it.
Yeah, so when the character does reflect yourself.
It's sort of gone back, back in the day you might be like, oh, all I'm doing is playing these kind of parts. And although I never did, I just didn't work out that way. And I can talk in a second why I think that might be. But I think as you get older, you're like, no, I do want to represent.
I'd like to embody that. Yeah, and present that.
I know it, and I think it's important in these times where we're like, invading countries, and I say, Muslims around the world are being persecuted all the time, and countries are being invaded, and the more we can sort of humanize people from that region. I mean, that's what was amazing about because of controversies. I didn't really watch the World Cup. It sort of put a bit of a tainted it a bit for me, and I sort of was really conflicted. But the story of the Moroccan team was really amazing, and I think it meant so much to that part of the world. Being an African country, and Arabs and Muslims, it gave hope. All we know of the Middle East is we don't see a lot of positive things. So something that's positive and human and as simple as football, and people just celebrating, is pretty amazing. So I mean, I don't know how interesting this is, but I was going to say that, like, being mixed raced, my mum's from the Isle of Wight, my dad's Iranian, and I think a lot of mixed people can relate to this. You sort of feel like you don't belong to any one, or you feel embarrassed to claim one because you're not full it, or that's your heritage. And I went on a right full journey with it, and now I sort of really sort of own it. And
as in, you own the mixed race part of your personality.
And just sort of take on the Middle Eastern part of me.
Right,
that part. English stuff came for free, really, and I was born here, raised here. My mum's English, my dad was always at work. I don't speak Farsi, but I guess I was always felt a bit like I couldn't, sort of imposter syndrome, taking on the Middle Eastern side of me, when actually, hang on, I'm just as Middle Eastern as I am English, so why would I feel that? And so all the stuff that I guess I've just been talking about is really important to me now.
And is that why you said a second ago, when you first came out of drama school, you think you didn't go up for many sort of Iranian, Middle Eastern role, or you didn't get, that wasn't the path your career took? Is that connected to this?
Well, it is connected in some ways, actually, in terms of imposter syndrome or mixed raceness, and what the industry understands as representation of sort of the MENA, which is Middle East and North African region, is that people have an idea of what someone should look like. So has dark skin, or so often you'd get a lot of South Asian people playing Middle Eastern people because of the West's idea of what someone from that it looks like, when actually an Iranian from the north of Iran or Syria could have your complexion or mine.
Yes.
And so it's so for me, I mean, someone said you're too smiley to play a terrorist. Actually, someone said once, but it. I mean, to be fair, that's not that bad. But I will take.
You're like, I'll take it. I'm smiley. I'm a happy guy.
There you go. Exactly. But I think people's like Iranian to Iranians, I look very Iranian.
Right.
And other Middle Eastern will tell me I'm Iranian, but I think the English industry wouldn't necessarily say I looked Iranian. Does that make sense?
And how absurd.
It was wild.
That's hilarious.
It's really wild. But they would say a South Asian, someone from South Asia might. Pakistani, Bengali, India, Sri Lankan, and it still happens. But the worst one was I went up for a part in a pilot for a sitcom that then got made, and I was playing the husband of one of the leads, who was going to be a regular. Went in, did the audition, went well. They said, "I think it's going to go your way." Waiting for the offer. Then a couple of days later, it was like, "I think they want to bring you in again." Okay, cool. They're now still looking for other people. And it got worse and worse. And I think I was going on holiday or had another job. And I said, "Look, it's happening." And the cast director just copy and pasted what had come from the commissioners, saying, "We want casting to look for someone who's more obviously BAME," is the term they use, who's more obviously BAME. So what, do I bring a shisha pipe in and a magic carpet and a like, what do you come in a genie outfit? Like, because of our ideas of what someone from a non-white background looks like. So
Yeah.
that becomes quite frustrating because...
And so I'm so sorry to interrupt your flow because this is so interesting. But again, I'm just aware always of, in case we're using terms that any of my listeners don't understand, BAME was a term that we're sort of trying to get out
it's kind
now.
of, it doesn't exist now, but Black, Asian, minority ethnic.
It used to be the way to basically say anyone who isn't white.
Yeah.
But it's generally considered a pretty offensive way of doing that just because it makes everything white or other.
Yeah, exactly.
How long ago was this?
4 years ago, 3 years ago, like not long.
Like just before COVID, basically.
Before COVID. No, it was a bit longer actually then. Yeah, it's probably about...
That's it, the COVID years, we forget about them.
Yeah, maybe it was about 4 years
When we
ago.
say 4 years, we mean 6 years because COVID
Yeah.
doesn't count.
No, I think it was about 4 years, but a year before COVID or something. But with that one, I guess it also just made me realise, like, oh, that is what I thought was a problem. Actually, is literally on paper. I literally have it in an
Yes.
email, and I guess why the cast director sent it on. Maybe agents could have shielded me from it, maybe. But I think they both felt, the agent and the casting probably felt, this is nothing to do with acting. This is a stupid idea from people who literally don't understand it. You need to be more ethnic. You need to be darker skinned or have a stronger brow or have whatever it is, because it's not about someone is or they're not.
If there's an incorrect, in inverted commas, Western viewpoint for Middle Eastern and North African people, then someone's got to break that at some point and cast people who actually are from that region.
It honestly happened to me recently, and it's something I wouldn't even say if it was a TV show or a play or whatever.
Fine.
Just because it's literally now, but the part is set in a Western place, but the people are heritage Middle Eastern, and it's a South Asian person playing it. And I'm not saying in the past, like, that's what happened. I played, they played, we can swap about. And it still can happen if people look like it. But are you telling me now there's no one that could have played that part? Even if I was rubbish, which I don't think I was, but even if I was rubbish. So there's enough now. As you get a bit older, maybe you can get more angry about stuff, but I'm probably less passionate about stuff. But this one, I don't know, it really annoys me because it's so linked to the politics of our world and how we view and anti, Islamophobia and Palestine and Yemen and Syria and Iran and all of it. We talk about representation, but in terms of this subject, and I'm sure lots of regions would argue the same, but it just feels so important because people are literally dying. Like, it's wild. And so as you can tell, I get quite passionate about it.
It's good, we must.
But so I do think it can be a casting of a play or a TV show. Like Dead Pixels I was in, this comedy.
Which was a Channel 4, E4.
Yeah. It was a show where there was 2 people from Middle Eastern heritage in it, myself and Sargon, where it wasn't about that. And it can be, but it wasn't. And that's why, it's massive. That's probably the only time it's ever been done. I don't think it was celebrated. I don't think it was actually probably celebrated in the same way that it would be others, because I think people don't feel like it counts, which is wild.
Yeah. Well, look, Dave, this is so interesting, and I feel like I knew all about Open Door anyway, but I feel like I've learned more, and now I would like you to read the speech. I feel a little bit naughty, like we haven't really discussed the speech very much, but that's because there's been so much else to chat about.
Yeah. All right. I can't think of anything. I'm sorry. I'd like to be able to, but I loved her. I do love her. I actually can't right now deal with the idea that she's gone, that I might not ever wake up with her again or go on holiday, because I think, and sorry this is a bit, but I think she might be my soulmate. Stupid things like, I love watching her eat. The way she eats is so, and she's funny and beautiful and brave, and like, we were on the tube once. It was really crushed, and there was this man, and he wasn't like a tramp. He was in a suit. He had a briefcase, and she realised this man had taken his penis out for his flies, and he was sort of rubbing it on her. But the tube was so packed, so people didn't notice. But when she saw it, she started shouting really loud, "Look at his chipolata," till everyone was looking at them. And you'd think that would be really embarrassing, wouldn't you? But I just love that. She's just fearless. And what happened is the whole tube together started chanting at him. We're all chanting at this man, Chipolata, Chipolata. And I thought, I actually feel part of something, you know? For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm part of something. Like people together can change things. People can stand up and stop shit things, because that's what it was like when I was with her. I felt connected to the world and all the things the world could be if we were just better versions of ourselves. So it's like the better world was sort of a shared space that existed in both our heads. So there was like a world that we lived in together and that we'd helped to make, and it was just for us. It was our secret. We had a secret and we lived together, and that's it really. I just really love her.
It's so cool. And I love in contemporary writing when people write very realistically.
It's nice as an actor, isn't it, to sort of do those bits, because you feel like you're doing proper truthful acting. I mean, it's
exactly.
It's just naturalism, but you feel like you're doing it. And I think I forgot the bit about where he talks about, and because of that, he feels connected to everything, and that we as people can sort of stop doing stuff, which I guess in terms of what we've been talking about in the podcast is even more, open door, or the other things I was passionate about, that, in these times we can sort of, I sound a bit wordy, don't I? But we can sort of come together and can do stuff when it feels like we can't.
But we can. It's got to be said, we can. What a lovely message to end a Christmas episode on.
Merry Christmas.
And a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Hear Me Out is a Lucy Eaton Productions podcast. Music composed by Tristan Kay and artwork by Rebecca Bright. Our heartfelt thanks to the estates and license holders that allow us to read our guests' speech choices. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, please subscribe, rate and review. You can follow us on social media at Pod Hear Me Out and enjoy visual clips of the interviews on our YouTube channel. Finally, if you would like to support Hear Me Out, go ahead and click the Patreon link at the bottom of the episode bios.